close to Christmas, isn't it? We are almost there. We've only got a couple days, and then Christmas Day will be here. I was doing some thinking just in this past week about Christmas traditions, because we all have different ones, right? We all have different ways that we celebrate. And I was thinking about, I don't know if any of you have this experience, but when I got married, I had a set of Christmas traditions that were unique to me. And then my husband had a set of I just combined two words, of Christmas traditions that were unique to him, right? And so we get married, and I don't know, I didn't even really think about how that would impact how we celebrate Christmas. But I remember our first Christmas together, realizing it pretty quickly. And so I don't know about you guys, you're laughing because you know. I don't know about you guys, but in the house that I grew up in, we did Christmas morning a specific way. So we did the whole, everybody gets in the living room, and all of the presents get handed out, but they get handed out one by one. And then, so the way that we do unwrapping is you get handed your gift, right? Somebody hands you one of your gifts, and then you take that one gift, okay, and you unwrap it, and everybody's looking at you while this process is happening, okay? You're unwrapping it. You take a good look at what it is. Oh my goodness, how did you know, right? You got the color I wanted. This is fantastic. You take in the gift, okay? And then you do the holding up of the gift so Dad can take a picture. You guys know what I'm talking about? I have perfected this pose because that's how we did it growing up. You hold it up, Dad takes a photo, Mom talks about how she found the gift at a good price, and it's a whole moment, right? It's a whole moment. And then when you're done, that paper gets collected, usually by Dad with a trash bag, and then it's someone else's turn. Does this sound familiar at all to anybody? Okay, it's someone else's turn. And so a sibling gets a gift, they do the whole moment process thing, everybody looks at them, and then we just keep going. It takes forever. It takes forever. We make a pot of coffee, and we just know we're gonna be in the living room for 5 hours. Merry Christmas, you're not going anywhere, right? That's how we do it. That's how we do Christmas morning in the Reyes house. Well, I get married to Brandon Ellis, and I show up to my first Christmas with his family. And I've got my cup of coffee, and I'm in my comfiest jammies, and I'm ready. I'm ready to be in the living room for a long time. And I sit down, and they hand me a gift. You're laughing. My husband's over there. They hand me a gift, and I'm like, awesome, it's Christmas. And I start to open this gift, right? And I don't even remember what it was, but I just remember that when I lifted it to do the pose, no one was looking at me. They were all opening their gifts at the same time. At the same time, they were all just free-for-all opening. And I looked up, and I was just like, you monsters. What are you doing? This isn't Christmas, right? I didn't get to see what any of them got. I didn't get to, none of them did the thing. And it was over in 10 minutes. Christmas, it was just in the blink of an eye. So, traditions, we all do them differently. Another one that we do at our house is the debate between should lights be white or colored? Yeah? Am I starting any Christmas fights this morning? I hope so. Because you should have an opinion about this. Okay? I really love colored lights. And not just colored lights, I love the big ones. The ones that you should put on the roof of your house. I like those on my tree. I want my tree to look like this beacon of just colored madness. I love that. My husband is more elegant than I. He prefers the classy, white lights. You can tell I have a lot of Christmas opinions. So we do Christmas lights differently too. But something we do try to do, something I think we're on the same page about, I don't know, that we try to do with our kids every year, is we try to, at least one night, we just pile them all in the car with a blanket and hot chocolate that they're inevitably going to spill in the back seat, and we look at Christmas lights. Yeah, you're shaking your head because you're a parent. Yeah, that hot chocolate, it's meeting the floor. But we try to drive around and look at Christmas lights. And our neighborhood is always so, I'm just always so impressed by how pretty the neighborhoods get at Christmas, People with different decorations and lights on their house. And there's just, I don't know, there's something warm and good about just driving around and just taking in the light. The light at Christmas time is special, isn't it? It's just something special. And this Christmas at Connection Point, we've been talking about light. We've talked about it for several weeks now. And the difference that light makes, not just at Christmas, but all the time. All the time. We've talked about how Jesus is the light of the world. And we've traveled and journeyed together through his birth story. And so we've spent several weeks talking through when God sent Jesus into the world to give light into the darkness. And we started this journey actually in Genesis chapter 1. We started at the very, very beginning, right? We looked at Genesis 1 and John 1, and we saw how at the very beginning of creation, God says, let there be light, right? And before there's even a sun, before there's even stars, there's somehow light, because God is the source of light. And then we looked at John 1 and we talked about how Jesus is also the light of new creation. He offers every one of us the ability to become a new creation. And then in week 2, we looked at the stories of 3 people in the Christmas narrative. We looked at Zechariah and we looked at Mary and we looked at Joseph and how they had a moment where this great light of heavenly hosts came and told them, do not be afraid. And they were to not be afraid because God was present with them. And even though their story was about to get a little crazy and some stuff was about to happen that was probably going to surprise them in a lot of ways, God reassured them, don't be afraid because I am going to be with you and it's going to make all the difference, right? And then in week 3, we looked at the shepherds. We talked about how they saw a star. They saw a great light. And when they followed it to Jesus, it gave them great joy that they had to share with people. We talked about how that joy can be ours too. And how when Jesus shines light into our life, it produces joy. And today, we're going to continue the narrative. And we're going to do that by reading Matthew chapter 2 together. So are you guys ready? Yeah? All right, let's do it. Matthew chapter 2, we're just going to start in the first 2 verses. It says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him. Now, this is sometime after the birth of Jesus. We're not totally sure exactly when, but it's sometime after. And there's some people here that I need to introduce you to because we're going to talk about them this morning. The first one is King Herod. I want you to know just a little bit about who he was, okay? Because he had a bit of a reputation that followed him. King Herod had a reputation of being somebody who sought power at all costs. He was ruthless, he was paranoid, he was wealthy, and he was really politically driven. And that's just the kind of person that people knew him to be. If it was good for him, he went for it. And if it wasn't, he could care less about it. And his actions showed that that's the kind of king and the kind of ruler that he was. And then there's these magi. They were advisors to the king. They would have been people who, they were kind of like professional astrologers. They just had this wisdom and knowledge about things going on in the world that were pretty impressive to people. And so kings would seek them out to give them advice and to help them make decisions. They were advisors and they were discerners and they were wise. And so we've got these magi, right? And they're visiting this ruthless king. And what do they say to him there in those first couple of verses? They ask him a question. They say, where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? Now, when I read that, I imagine Herod maybe paying attention, maybe not, I don't know, just in the room listening to the Magi talk. But I picture when they say the words King of the Jews, he sits up a little differently. And he starts to listen a little more attentively. Because who's the king? Herod. I'm the king. Who is this person that you're telling me about? And then they continue to talk and they say, we saw his star. Man, I don't know about you, but if I struggle with pride like Herod, I'm hearing the words his star and I'm taking that real personally. This guy has a star? Like he owns part of the sky? This isn't what I want to hear. They say, we saw his star when it rose and we have come to worship him. So I can only imagine that Herod isn't very happy about what he's hearing. But let's continue to read and let's find out for ourselves. It says, in verses 3 and 4, it says, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and the teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. So Herod's doing a little bit of scrambling now. He wants to know who this guy is. So he doesn't just have the Magi in front of him, but he calls on the chief priests. He calls on the teachers, and he's trying to figure out, okay, who is this guy, right? And what he realizes is that this king of the Jews, he's actually somebody who has been awaited for a really long time. This isn't just some random person who gained political power one day and, oh, here he is on the scene. No, he actually finds out that this king is somebody that they've been waiting for and waiting for. Because they tell him in verses 5 through 6, they say, in Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. I want us to notice even just the way that they describe King Jesus. A ruler who will shepherd my people. That sounds unique, doesn't it? I think we're going to find out this morning that it is. So when the Magi share this, when the teachers and the religious leaders, when they shared this with the king, they're actually quoting from a prophet. They're quoting from a prophet who years and years before this moment had this to say about Jesus. And it's going to sound really familiar. It's in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times. So imagine Herod taking all of this information in. He's probably not happy about a new king in town, and he's becoming more and more uncomfortable. And so he does something about it. In Matthew 2, verses 7 through 8, then Herod called the Magi secretly, and he found out from the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him. Now we can gather from the context here that Herod wasn't truly wanting to worship Jesus as king. He was looking for him with intentions. I'm not totally sure what those were, but I don't think they were great. He searches for Jesus, not so that he can follow him, but so that he can continue to be in control of his own life. And he sends the Magi on ahead of him to search for Jesus and to let him know what they find. And so in verses 9 and 10, we read what the Magi did. It says, after they heard the king, they went on their way. And the star that they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. And so these Magi who had followed the star to begin with, they continued to follow the star. They look to the sky and they follow this light that just leads the way. And as they follow it, they begin to realize we're getting closer, we're getting closer. And then they have a moment where they realize, oh my goodness, we're here. Like the one who we've been searching for, the one who fulfills all of these prophecies that people have been clinging to for years. We're here in this moment with him. And when we talk about Jesus fulfilling prophecies, some of those are really, really beautiful. They're found in the Old Testament, and they're just these like beautiful promises of the Christ who would come and shed light on the darkness of our world. I want to read just one of them to you. It's in Isaiah 60, starting from the very beginning and reading until verse 6. It says, arise, shine, for your light has come. And I just want to pause there in verse 1. And I want us to think about, man, being in the darkness without Christ. being in a spot where the world just feels dark, and then hearing these words, arise, shine, for your light has come. Man, that's the hope that Jesus brought. That's the hope that they waited for. And the glory of the Lord rises upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples, but the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Man, even in the language of this prophet or this prophecy, it reminds me of a star, doesn't it? Like this guiding light over the people. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look about you. All assemble and come to you. Your sons come from afar, and your daughters are carried on the hip. Then you will look and be radiant. Your heart will throb and swell with joy. The wealth on the seas will be brought to you, and the riches of the nations will come. Herds of camels will cover your land, young camels of Midian and Ephah, and all from Sheba will come, bearing gold and incense and proclaiming the praise of the Lord. What a beautiful picture, right? Of Jesus in our world. What a beautiful picture. But as I read through Matthew 2, verses 9 and 10 in this promise, I don't know, I began to think to myself, okay, so I see why the Magi are in this, right? I see why they're mentioned in the story of Jesus' birth. They're here in Isaiah 60, right? Bearing gold and incense and proclaiming the praise of the Lord. I see it. But why did we go into so much detail about King Herod? Why did we even make the stop there in Matthew 2? You know? Because the Magi are following a star to begin with, aren't they? That's how they get to King Herod. And they show up and they've already discerned that there's something special going on. And they tell the king. And then we have this moment with King Herod. And then when they leave him, they're following the star again. It's not like King Herod gives them any new information, right? It's not like he has any insight about where they should go. They're following the star and they get to Jesus. But we see him in the story still. He still gets several verses there in one of the most important accounts in the Bible. I thought it was just interesting that he was there. But as I thought about it, and as I just wondered and spent time with the Lord thinking about it, I actually thought about a manger scene. And I think those are familiar, right, to each of us. Maybe you have one in your home or in your yard. What does a manger scene look like? It's got a couple elements, doesn't it? It's got Jesus, right? It's got Mary, it's got Joseph. And then it's got on one side, probably shepherds, right? Are you guys with me? Does this sound familiar? Okay. On one side, it's probably got some shepherds. On the other side, it's got the Magi or the wise men, right? If you're at my house, I have 2 young boys. There's probably also like a Sonic and like a dinosaur. They like to add to the manger scene things that were not there, but that's okay. But that's the manger scene that we're used to, right? Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and then these shepherds, and then these wise men. They're part of the narrative. And as I got to thinking about those things, I thought, oh Lord, you are the king. And even in this Christmas narrative, I think he's reminding us that he's a king who rules really differently. I think the mention of Herod might very well be in the Christmas story to remind us that Jesus is a king unlike any king we've ever seen. That unlike Herod, who wanted political power and who wanted control and who fought for his own well-being, Jesus is a king who ushers in a kind of kingdom that is so different. So different. Jesus is a king, but he rules like a shepherd. He's a king, but he rules like a shepherd. He rules through love. And I think Herod's presence in the Christmas narrative reminds us of the contrast between the kingdom of this world and the kingdom of heaven. Remember what we read in Micah chapter 5, verse 2? It said, "But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be a ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times." But if we keep reading, we'll see in verse 4 of Micah 5, it says, He will stand and he will shepherd his flock. In the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. Remember, Jesus is a king, but he rules like what? A shepherd. Yeah. He will stand and shepherd his flock. His reign and rule is different than anything that we have ever seen. Jesus rules through love. And participating in his kingdom, in the kingdom of heaven, it requires us to take that invitation that love gives us. In 1 John 4, verse 9, it says this: "This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him." Of all the ways that God could show his great love for you, he chose that the most perfect way to do it was to send his Son. And that's what he did. And sending his Son means a couple things. And we have talked about those things throughout the Christmas season. Man, if God sends us Jesus, then we have access to things in ways that we've never had access to them before. And we've talked about hope. And we've lit a candle to remind us that the light of Jesus gives hope that is unlike anything this world has ever seen. That the light of Jesus gives us a glimmer of hope that even the worst darkness cannot overcome. And there are many of you in this room who have experienced darkness in your life. Moments in life that just feel like chaos, that feel terrible, that feel like, how is life ever going to feel different than it feels right now? Kind of darkness. And for some of you, the only thing that got you up out of bed in the morning, the only thing that lets you get some sleep at night, was clinging to the glimmer of hope that Jesus gives. If you've been there, I've been there too. That hope is important, and Jesus offers it to us with his presence. We've also taken a look at peace and how the coming of Jesus means that we can have peace that we don't even understand. That even when life feels crazy, we have Jesus to anchor ourselves to. That he can offer us light in the darkness through his peace. And then last week we talked about joy. How, man, when the shepherds heard, they had joy and they shared it. When Jesus enters our lives, he gives us joy that we have to share. Have you ever felt that way? Man, when Jesus has done something in your life and you're like, I just got to talk about it. I just got to tell someone about it. That joy that comes from the presence of Jesus. And then today, we're reminded that when Jesus lights up our darkness, he does it through love. The complete, giving of himself for us. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. And so why do we take time at Christmas to talk about the birth of Jesus? Because it is the moment that God was so moved by compassion and love that he had to do something. He had to send us his Son. In Matthew 22, Jesus is being asked about the greatest commandment. And the people that are asking him this question, they're actually trying to trip him up, but Jesus' answer is still really great. He looks at them and he tells them that the greatest commandment is to love God and then to love their neighbor as themselves. To love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. And he goes so far as to say that every bit of the law and the prophets is summed up in this one command. And how can he say that? It's because when we see how much we are loved by God, when we truly see how much we are loved by God, we practice love the way Jesus would. See, the love of God is not something that's just like a passing feeling or empty words. But the kind of love that God has for you this morning is an active love. It's a love that moves God the Father to send Jesus into your darkness. See, Jesus didn't approach our darkness from a distance. He stepped right into it, and he offered light. When we see how much we're loved by God, we will be moved, and we will practice love the way that Jesus would. And what could that look like? It might look like working towards the well-being of others, even if it doesn't benefit us at all. That is loving others like Jesus would. It might look like giving generously of ourselves, understanding that the best way to have anything is with an open hand. It might look like us actually going to those in need, stepping into the darkness of those around us, knowing that we have light to offer through Jesus. I want us to finish up the story of these magi as we close this morning. I want you to know what the rest of Matthew 2 says about them. In verses 11 and 12, it says, "On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him." What a moment that must have been for them, right? "Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route." See, when these magi encountered Jesus, when they encountered the Messiah, it was a beautiful moment for them. And then immediately, what I love is that God just reroutes them. He reroutes them and he leads them and he sends them on another way. Have you ever had an encounter with Jesus that rerouted your life? Have you ever just had like a moment with him and you were going one way and then you were like, yeah, I have to go a new way? If you haven't this morning, I want you to know that you can. Man, if you've been working to figure out this life on your own and you keep hitting a wall and you keep wondering why like life just feels like you can't get a handle on it, I want you to know that there's a new way. And it's not always an easy way, and it's not always a perfect way, but it's the way. When you have an encounter with Jesus, he can change your life in a way that makes you brand new, in a way that shows you a new way to experience the love of God and to share that love with the people around you. So this morning, I've got a couple questions for us as we begin to wrap up. These questions, we call them car conversations because they're meant to be taken with us and asked maybe in the car if you've got kids with you. They're learning from the same scripture we are today. And the first question I have is this. And I think it's important not just for our, I think this question is important at any age. At any age. Do you know how much God loves you? I know it sounds simple, but man, I'm guilty sometimes of forgetting just how much God loves me. That even in my worst darkness, he's light. And he doesn't keep himself at a distance from me, but he steps into my darkness so that I can have light too. Do you know how much God loves you? He loves you enough to give up his son, to send Jesus so that you can have life. Do you know how much he loves you? And then the second question I hope you'll take with you today is this. Who do we hope knows that they're deeply loved this Christmas? And how can we show them? Because see, the love of God is so powerful that it will move us when we experience it. It will move us to those around us. It will give us great compassion and generosity for those in our life. And I would guarantee you that there are people in your world, who this Christmas, they need someone to remind them that they're deeply loved. Maybe you're sitting here today and you're like, man, I wish someone would remind me. Well, let me remind you. You're deeply loved in ways that are hard to put into words by a God who knows you, who cherishes you, who wants to be near to you. This Christmas, I hope you know it in a way that feels brand new. And as you begin to know it, I hope you share it.